The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the weathered general store, and Clara Owens stepped down onto the dusty street of Fort Collins, Colorado, with nothing but the threadbare dress on her back and a heart full of desperate hope. The year was 1878, and she had traveled nearly 2,000 miles from Philadelphia to marry a man she had never met, only to discover upon arrival that Mr. Howard Patterson, the gentleman who had sent for her, had been dead for 3 weeks from a fever that swept through the town. The stagecoach driver had delivered this news with all the ceremony of announcing the weather, and now Clara stood alone in the harsh afternoon sun, her entire world crumbling around her like the dried earth beneath her worn shoes. She had spent her last dollar on the journey west, selling every possession she owned to afford the passage. There was no money for a return ticket, no family waiting back east who would welcome her home. Her parents had died the previous winter, and her only brother had made it clear that his new wife had no interest in supporting a spinster sister. At 23 years old, Clara had gambled everything on this one chance at a new life, and fate had dealt her a cruel hand. The general store proprietor, a round woman with kind eyes named Mrs. Henderson, had taken pity on her and offered her a corner of the storeroom to sleep in for the night. "There's a rancher comes into town tomorrow for supplies, Mrs. Henderson had said, pressing a warm roll into Clara's trembling hands. "Young Yates Patterson, no relation to Howard despite the name. He's been alone out at his spread for near about 2 years since his father passed. Good man, quiet, keeps to himself mostly. Maybe he could use some help if you are willing to work." Clara had nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. She had not eaten since the previous morning, and the simple kindness of bread brought tears to her eyes that she hastily wiped away. She would not cry. She had survived too much already to break down now. That evening, lying on a rough blanket in the dim storeroom surrounded by sacks of flour and beans, Clara allowed herself to wonder what kind of man this Yates Patterson might be. The name Patterson felt like some cosmic jest, as though the universe was mocking her misfortune. She fell into an uneasy sleep, dreaming of endless prairies and voices calling her name that she could never quite reach. Morning came too quickly. Clara washed her face in the basin. Mrs. Henderson provided and did her best to make herself presentable, though her dark hair had come loose from its pins, and her dress bore the stains of hard travel. She helped Mrs. Henderson arrange goods on the shelves, grateful for something to occupy her hands and mind, when the bell above the door chimed. The man who entered had to duck slightly beneath the doorframe. He stood well over 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders that spoke of years of hard labor. His dark hair needed cutting, falling nearly to his collar, and several days' worth of stubble shadowed his jaw. But it was his eyes that caught Clara's attention, a striking pale blue that seemed almost gray in the morning light filtering through the window. Those eyes held a deep weariness that Clara recognized because she had seen it in her own reflection. "Morning, Mrs. Henderson," he said, his voice a low rumble. "I've got my usual list." "Good morning, Yates," Mrs. Henderson replied warmly. "I'll get your items together. But first, I want you to meet someone. This is Miss Clara Owens. She came all the way from Philadelphia to marry Howard Patterson." Yates's expression shifted, something that might have been sympathy crossing his weathered features. "I heard about Howard. I'm sorry for your loss, Miss Owens." Clara straightened her spine, meeting his gaze directly. "I appreciate your kindness, Mr. Patterson, but truthfully, I never knew the man. I find myself in a difficult situation, however, and Mrs. Henderson thought you might have work available on your ranch. I'm a hard worker, I promise you. I can cook, clean, tend animals, mend clothes. I'll do whatever needs doing." Yates was quiet for a long moment, studying her with those pale eyes. Clara forced herself not to look away, not to fidget under his scrutiny. She needed this chance, needed it more desperately than she had ever needed anything. "My ranch is 10 miles outside town," he finally said. "It's just me out there. Wouldn't be proper to have an unmarried woman living under my roof without it causing talk." Clara's heart sank, but before she could respond, Yates continued. "So I suppose the question is whether you'd be willing to marry a stranger after all, just not the one you were expecting." The words hung in the air between them. Mrs. Henderson gasped softly, but Clara barely heard her. She searched Yates's face for any sign of cruelty or ill intent, but found only an honest directness that matched his plain speaking. "You don't know me," Clara said carefully. "I could be anyone." "You could be," Yates agreed. "But you're standing here asking for work instead of begging for charity. You look me in the eye when you speak, and Mrs. Henderson vouched for you, which is good enough for me." He paused, then added, "I'm not looking for a love match, Miss Owens. I need help on the ranch and you need a home. Seems like we could help each other." It was possibly the least romantic proposal in the history of the world, but Clara found herself considering it seriously. What other choice did she have? She could try to find work in town, but Fort Collins was small and opportunities would be limited. She had no money, no prospects, and winter would come eventually. At least Yates Patterson seemed honest, and there was something in his eyes that suggested he understood loneliness as well as she did. "I would need to know that you're a decent man," Clara said quietly. "I won't put myself in danger." "That's fair," Yates replied. "Reverend Matthews is here in town. We could speak with him together if you'd like. He's known me since I was a boy. He'll tell you the truth about my character." Mrs. Henderson nodded enthusiastically. "Yates is a good man, dear." "I wouldn't have suggested him otherwise." Clara took a deep breath. "Then yes, Mr. Patterson, I'll marry you." "Yates," he corrected gently. "If we're to be married, you should call me Yates." "Clara," she offered in return. They found Reverend Matthews at the small church at the edge of town. A white-haired man with a gentle manner who indeed confirmed that Yates was known as an honest, hard-working rancher, who had never given anyone cause for complaint. The Reverend seemed surprised by the sudden wedding, but agreed to perform the ceremony that very afternoon. "You have a dress?" Mrs. Henderson asked Clara as they left the church. "Something nicer than what you're wearing." Clara shook her head, embarrassed. "I sold everything to pay for my journey. This is all I have." Mrs. Henderson made a disapproving sound and promptly dragged Clara back to her store, where she pulled out a simple blue cotton dress from her inventory. "This will do nicely. It's not fancy, but it's clean and the color will suit you. Consider it a wedding gift." Tears threatened again, but Clara managed to hold them back. "I don't know how to thank you." "Just be happy, dear. That's thanks enough." The wedding took place at 3 o'clock that afternoon in the small church, with Mrs. Henderson and her husband as witnesses. Clara wore the blue dress, and someone had found a few wildflowers to make a small bouquet. Yates had cleaned up, shaving and changing into what was clearly his best shirt, though it was still plain and practical. As they stood before Reverend Matthews, Clara studied the man who was about to become her husband. He was perhaps 27 or 28, she guessed, with strong features that would have been handsome if not for the tired lines around his eyes. His hands were calloused and scarred from ranch work, and he held himself with a quiet reserve that suggested he was not comfortable being the center of attention. The ceremony was brief and simple. When Yates slipped a plain gold band onto Clara's finger, she noticed his hands were shaking slightly. It occurred to her that he might be as nervous about this arrangement as she was, and somehow that made her feel better. "You may kiss your bride," Reverend Matthews announced. Yates looked at Clara, a question in his eyes. She gave a small nod, and he leaned down to press a chaste kiss to her lips. It was brief and respectful, but Clara felt warmth spread through her chest nonetheless. They signed the marriage certificate, and just like that, Clara Owens became Clara Patterson, wife to a rancher she had met only hours before. Yates helped her into his wagon, which was loaded with the supplies he had purchased from the general store. As they left Fort Collins behind, heading west across the open prairie, Clara watched the town disappear and wondered what her life would become. The silence stretched between them, not quite comfortable but not hostile either. Finally, Yates spoke. "I want you to know that I'll respect your privacy," he said, keeping his eyes on the trail ahead. "The ranch house has 2 bedrooms. You'll have your own space. I won't expect anything from you that you're not willing to give." Clara felt relief wash through her, followed by an unexpected pang of something else she could not quite name. "Thank you, that's very considerate. I just want to be clear about things," Yates continued. "I won't lie to you, Clara. The ranch is struggling. My father, he was a good man but not much of a businessman. When he died, he left me with debts and a herd that's too small to be really profitable. I work from sunup to sundown most days, and it's still barely enough. I'm hoping that with your help, maybe we can start to turn things around." "I'll do whatever I can," Clara promised. "I meant what I said about being a hard worker." Yates finally glanced at her, and something in his expression softened. "I believe you." The ranch appeared on the horizon as the sun began its descent toward the mountains in the distance. It was modest, a simple wooden house with a barn and a few outbuildings, surrounded by rolling grassland dotted with cattle. Everything looked weathered but well maintained, speaking to Yates's dedication if not his prosperity. As they approached, Clara could see that the house needed paint, and the fence around the small garden needed mending, but it had a solid, honest look to it. This would be her home now, for better or worse. Yates helped her down from the wagon, and Clara noticed again how carefully he touched her, as though she might break. Together they carried the supplies into the house. The interior was Spartan, and clearly the domain of a man living alone. The main room served as both kitchen and living space, with a stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table, and a few chairs. Everything was clean but bare of any decoration or comfort. "This is the main room," Yates said, sounding almost apologetic. "My bedroom is there, and the other bedroom is through here." He led her to a small room that contained a simple bed, a chest of drawers, and a window that looked out over the prairie. "It's not much. It's wonderful," Clara said honestly. After sleeping in a storeroom the night before, and facing the very real possibility of having nowhere to go at all, this small, clean room felt like a luxury. "Thank you, Yates," he nodded, looking relieved. "I'll bring in the rest of the supplies and tend to the horses. Take your time getting settled." After he left, Clara sat on the edge of the bed and allowed herself a moment to simply breathe. She was married. She had a home. She was safe. Whatever else happened, she had those things, which was more than she'd had 24 hours ago. She stood and smoothed down the blue dress Mrs. Henderson had given her, then went out to help Yates unload the wagon. He looked surprised to see her but did not protest, as she carried sacks of flour and beans into the house. As twilight fell, Clara explored the kitchen and found it better stocked than she had expected. There was bacon and coffee, dried beans, some potatoes, and various other staples. She set about making dinner, wanting to prove her worth and also needing the familiar comfort of a task she knew well. Yates came in from the barn as she was frying bacon and making pan bread. He washed his hands in the basin by the door and sat at the table watching her work. "Smells good," he offered. "It's nothing fancy," Clara replied, "but it's hot and filling." They ate in relative silence, but it was a more comfortable quiet than before. The food helped, giving them something to focus on besides the strangeness of their situation. "This is the best meal I've had in months," Yates said, finishing his second helping. "I'm not much of a cook. I mostly just boil things or eat them cold." "Well, you won't have to do that anymore," Clara said. "I'll handle the cooking from now on." "I appreciate that." He paused, then added, "I'll need to head out early tomorrow to check on the herd. There's a cow I think might be ready to calve." "You'll be alone for most of the day. Will you be all right?" "I'll be fine," Clara assured him. "I'll work on cleaning the house and maybe start planning a proper garden. The one outside has potential but needs attention." Yates's expression brightened slightly. "My mother used to keep a garden. After she died, I never could seem to keep it going right. If you could get it producing again, that would be something." They cleaned up the dishes together, working side by side in a way that felt surprisingly natural. When the work was done, an awkward moment arrived as they both stood in the main room, suddenly aware that night had fallen and they were alone together. "I should turn in," Yates said finally. "Morning comes early. If you need anything during the night, just knock on my door." "I will." "Thank you, Yates, for everything." He nodded, his eyes meeting hers for a long moment. "Thank you, Clara. I know this isn't what you planned, but I'm glad you're here." Then he disappeared into his room, closing the door quietly behind him. Clara went to her own small room and changed into the nightgown that Mrs. Henderson had thoughtfully included with the dress. She lay in the unfamiliar bed, listening to the sounds of the prairie night through her window, the wind in the grass, and the distant call of an owl. She thought about the strange turns her life had taken, how she had come west to marry one Patterson and ended up married to another. Yates seemed like a good man, honest and hardworking, but they were still strangers bound together by circumstance and necessity. She wondered if they would ever be more than that, and whether she even wanted them to be. Sleep claimed her before she found any answers. Clara woke to the sound of movement in the main room. The sky outside her window was just beginning to lighten. She dressed quickly in her old traveling dress, the blue one being too nice for housework, and emerged to find Yates making coffee. "Morning," he said. "I didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't. I'm an early riser anyway." She moved to the stove. "Let me make you breakfast before you go." "You don't have to do that." "I want to," Clara said firmly. "You'll work better on a full stomach." She made eggs and bacon with the last of the bread from the night before. Yates ate quickly, clearly eager to get to his work, but he seemed pleased by the hot meal. "I'll be back before dark," he said as he prepared to leave. "There's a rifle over the door if you need it, though you shouldn't have any trouble." "I know how to shoot," Clara said. "My father taught me." Yates looked impressed. "Good to know." After he left, Clara stood in the quiet house and planned her day. She started by thoroughly cleaning the main room, scrubbing the floors and washing the windows until they shone. In the chest of drawers in the main room, she found linens that needed mending and set those aside for later. By midday, she had the house cleaner than it had probably been in years. She made herself a simple lunch and then went outside to examine the garden. The plot was overgrown with weeds, but underneath, she could see the remnants of what had once been a productive space. With the right care and some seeds, it could provide vegetables through the summer and fall. She was pulling weeds, her hands already dirty and her back starting to ache, when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Clara stood, shading her eyes against the sun, and saw a rider coming toward the house. Her heart quickened with nervousness, but she forced herself to remain calm as the stranger drew near. The rider was a woman, Clara saw with relief, probably in her mid-30s, with sun-weathered skin and sharp, intelligent eyes. She rode with the easy confidence of someone who had spent a lifetime on horseback. "You must be the new Mrs. Patterson," the woman called as she dismounted. "I'm Dorothy Murphy. My husband and I have the ranch about 5 miles north of here." "Clara Patterson," Clara replied, wiping her dirty hands on her apron. "It's nice to meet you." Dorothy looked her over frankly. "You're the mail-order bride who came for Howard, aren't you? Word travels fast in these parts." "Didn't expect you'd end up married to Yates, though I can't say I'm surprised he jumped at the chance. Man needs a wife, living out here alone the way he does." Clara was not sure how to respond to such direct speech, but Dorothy's manner was friendly rather than judgmental. "I know it must seem strange," Clara said carefully. "Strange? Honey, this is the frontier. Nothing's strange out here. My sister married a man she met exactly once before their wedding day, and they've been happy as clams for 15 years now." Dorothy gestured at the garden. "I see you're already putting in work. That's good. Yates is a fine man, but he needs someone to help make this place a home instead of just a spot to sleep between workdays." They talked for a while, and Dorothy proved to be a wealth of practical information about life on the Colorado prairie. She promised to send over some vegetable seeds from her own garden and invited Clara and Yates to dinner the following Sunday. "It'll be good for you to meet some of the other families in the area," Dorothy said as she prepared to leave. "We look after each other out here. You're one of us now." After Dorothy left, Clara felt considerably less alone. She returned to her weeding with renewed energy, and by the time Yates returned that evening, she had cleared nearly half the garden plot. He noticed immediately. "You've been working hard." "I like to be useful," Clara said, brushing dirt from her hands. "How was your day? Did the cow calve?" "She did. A healthy bull calf." He looked tired but pleased. "That's good news for the herd." Over dinner, Clara told him about Dorothy's visit, and Yates nodded approvingly. "The Murphys are good people. Jack Murphy has helped me out more than once when I needed an extra hand for something. Dorothy invited us to dinner on Sunday. That's kind of her. We should go." He paused. "It'll be good for people to meet you properly. As my wife." There was something in the way he said, "my wife," that made Clara's heart skip strangely. She pushed the feeling aside and focused on her meal. The days began to develop a rhythm. Yates would rise before dawn and head out to work the ranch, while Clara managed the house and garden. She baked bread, mended clothes, cleaned and organized until the house began to look like a real home. She found curtains folded away in a trunk and hung them in the windows, brightening the rooms considerably. In the evenings, they would have dinner together and talk about their days. Clara learned about the challenges of ranching, about the constant worry of predators and weather and market prices. Yates learned about her life in Philadelphia, about the parents she had lost, and the loneliness that had driven her west. They were still formal with each other, still careful, but a tentative friendship was forming. Clara found herself looking forward to the evenings, to the sound of Yates's voice and the rare smile that would cross his face when she said something that amused him. Sunday came, and they dressed in their best clothes to visit the Murphys. Clara wore the blue dress again, and Yates wore a clean shirt and vest. As they drove the wagon north across the prairie, Clara was acutely aware of his presence beside her, the solid warmth of him and the capable way he handled the reins. The Murphy ranch was larger than Yates's spread, with a bigger house and more outbuildings. Dorothy greeted them warmly, and her husband Jack proved to be a jovial man with a booming laugh. They had 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, who regarded Clara with curious but friendly eyes. Over a generous dinner, Clara met several other neighboring families who had been invited to welcome the new bride. Everyone was kind, though Clara could feel them assessing her, wondering about the hasty marriage. She held her head high and answered their questions honestly, and by the end of the evening she felt she had made a good impression. On the ride home, Yates was quiet. "Finally," he said, "you handled that well. I know it couldn't have been easy being looked over like a prize mare at auction." Clara laughed despite herself. "That's a fair description, but they seem like good people. I think I'll like having them as neighbors." "They're the best," Yates agreed. He hesitated, then added, "You looked beautiful today. I should have said that earlier." The compliment caught Clara off guard, warming her more than it probably should have. "Thank you. That's kind of you to say." "It's not kindness. It's the truth." They fell silent again, but it was a charged silence now, full of things neither of them seemed ready to say out loud. The weeks passed, and early summer settled over the Colorado prairie in full. The garden Clara had worked so hard on began to produce, providing fresh vegetables that improved their meals considerably. She made preserves and pickles, preparing for the winter to come. Yates taught her to ride the gentler of his 2 horses, a mare named Molly, so that she could move around the ranch more easily. Clara proved to be a natural rider, and soon she was accompanying him on some of his shorter rounds, learning about the herd and the land. They were working together to mend a section of fence one hot afternoon when Yates suddenly straightened, looking toward the horizon. Clara followed his gaze and saw riders approaching, 3 of them, moving at a steady pace toward the ranch. "You recognize them?" Clara asked, hearing the tension in Yates's voice. "No," he said shortly. "Get back to the house, Clara. Take the rifle. I'm not leaving you out here alone. Clara, please, I don't know who these men are or what they want." But Clara had already seen the hard look on Yates's face, and she was not about to abandon him to face potential trouble alone. "I can shoot, remember. We're better off together." Yates looked like he wanted to argue, but the riders were getting closer. He nodded curtly. "Stay behind me." The 3 men rode up and stopped a respectful distance away. They were rough-looking, with the weathered faces of men who spent their lives outdoors, but their eyes were calculating and cold. The one in the middle, a heavy-set man with a black beard, appeared to be the leader. "Afternoon," the man said, his voice deceptively friendly. "This the Patterson Ranch, it is," Yates replied, his tone neutral. "I'm Yates Patterson. What can I do for you gentlemen? Name's Cutler. We're working for the Colorado Cattle Company. They're buying up ranches in this area, consolidating the land. We're here to make you an offer." "I'm not interested in selling," Yates said immediately. Cutler smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "You haven't even heard the offer yet. Don't need to. This ranch has been in my family for 20 years. It's not for sale." "Everything's for sale at the right price, Patterson." Cutler's eyes moved to Clara. "That your wife? Pretty little thing. Must be hard for her living out here so isolated." "Wouldn't she be happier in town, with money in the bank and a comfortable life?" "My wife is perfectly happy where she is," Yates said, his voice hardening. "And I've told you the ranch isn't for sale. I'll ask you to leave now." The other 2 riders shifted in their saddles, hands moving subtly toward their gun belts. Clara's heart pounded, but she kept her face calm. Cutler's false smile faded. "The Colorado Cattle Company is going to own all this land eventually, Patterson. You could make this easy on yourself and take a fair offer, or you could make it hard. Your choice." "I've made my choice. Now get off my property." For a tense moment, Clara thought the situation might turn violent, but Cutler finally nodded and pulled his horse around. "You'll be hearing from us again. Think about what's best for that pretty wife of yours." The 3 men rode away, and Clara released a breath she had not realized she was holding. Yates stood rigid, watching until the riders disappeared from sight. "Are you all right?" Clara asked, touching his arm. He flinched slightly at the contact, then seemed to force himself to relax. "I'm fine. I'm sorry you had to see that. Don't apologize. I'm your wife. We face things together." Even as she said it, Clara realized she meant it. Somewhere over the past weeks, this arrangement had become real to her. This was her home, and Yates was her husband, and she would stand beside him against whatever came. Yates looked at her, really looked at her, and something shifted in his expression. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for staying. For not running." "Where would I run to?" Clara tried to make it light, but Yates shook his head. "You could have gone back to the house like I asked. You could have stayed out of it, but you stood with me." He reached out and gently touched her cheek, his calloused fingers surprisingly tender. "You're braver than you know, Clara Patterson." Clara's breath caught at the touch, at the warmth in his eyes. They stood there in the summer heat, looking at each other as though seeing each other for the first time, and Clara felt her heart begin to race for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. Yates seemed to realize what he was doing and dropped his hand, stepping back. "We should get back to the house. I want to check that everything's secure." That night, Yates was restless. Clara could hear him moving around long after they had both supposedly gone to bed. Finally, unable to sleep herself, she got up and found him sitting at the kitchen table in the dim light of a single lamp, writing a letter. "What are you doing?" she asked. He looked up, surprised. "Writing to the territorial marshal. I want to report what happened today, get it on record." Clara sat down across from him. "Do you think those men will come back?" "Maybe. The Colorado Cattle Company has been buying up smaller ranches all across this part of the territory. Some folks say they're using intimidation tactics when people won't sell willingly." He set down his pen. "I won't lie to you, Clara, this could get difficult." "Then we'll face it together," Clara said firmly. "I'm not afraid. You should be. These are dangerous men. I've faced dangerous things before. Poverty, illness, loss. I survived all of that, and I'll survive this too. We will survive it." Yates studied her face in the lamplight. "You really mean that, don't you? You're not just saying what you think I want to hear." "I never say things I don't mean," Clara replied. "That's not who I am." A slow smile crossed Yates's face, and Clara's heart did that strange skipping thing again. "I'm starting to understand that about you." They sat together in the quiet night, and Clara felt something growing between them, something warm and real that had nothing to do with their practical arrangement and everything to do with genuine feeling. The next few weeks were tense. Yates hired Jack Murphy's oldest son to help keep watch over the ranch, and Clara made sure the rifle was always loaded and accessible. But the men from the Colorado Cattle Company did not return, and gradually the household began to relax again. Summer deepened into the full heat of July. Clara's garden flourished, and she spent long hours preserving the harvest. Yates worked tirelessly with the cattle, trying to build up the herd and prepare for the fall sales that would determine whether the ranch could survive another year. They fell into a comfortable partnership, working side by side on the endless tasks that ranch life demanded. Clara found herself watching Yates when he was not looking, admiring the strength in his arms as he worked, the determined set of his jaw, the rare smile that transformed his serious face. She was falling in love with him. She realized one evening as she watched him repair a bridle by lamplight, his long fingers working with patient skill. The realization should have frightened her, but instead it felt right, natural, as though her heart had known something her mind was only now catching up to. The question was whether Yates felt the same way. He was always respectful, always kind, but he maintained a careful distance between them. He had never attempted to enter her room, never tried to claim husbandly rights, never even kissed her since their wedding day. Clara did not know if this was because he did not want her or because he was trying to be honorable. Dorothy Murphy visited regularly and had become a good friend. One afternoon in late July, as they worked together on a quilt, Dorothy said bluntly, So when are you and Yates going to stop tiptoeing around each other and admit you're in love? Clara's needle slipped, pricking her finger. I don't know what you mean. Oh, please, Dorothy said with a laugh. I've seen the way you look at him when you think no one's watching. And he's even worse. Man can barely keep his eyes off you. It's sweet, really, but also a bit ridiculous. Yates doesn't feel that way about me, Clara protested. Our marriage was just a practical arrangement. He needed help with the ranch and I needed a home. Maybe that's how it started, but honey, that's not where you are now. Trust me on this. I've been married 15 years and I know what love looks like. You too have it. Clara wanted to believe her, but doubt held her back. Even if I do have feelings for him, I don't know how he feels. He's never said anything, never even tried to. To what? Kiss you? Take you to bed? Dorothy shook her head. That man is trying so hard to be honorable it's probably killing him. He doesn't want you to feel pressured or trapped. But Clara, you're going to have to meet him halfway. Show him that you want more than just a business arrangement. I wouldn't know how, Clara admitted. Just talk to him. Tell him how you feel. Life's too short and uncertain out here to waste time being shy about these things. That evening, Clara worked up her courage. She made Yates's favorite dinner, beef stew with vegetables from her garden and fresh bread. After they had eaten and cleaned up, instead of retreating to her room as usual, she sat down at the table across from him. Yates, I need to talk to you about something. He looked up from the harness he was mending, his expression attentive. All right. Clara took a deep breath. When we got married, we both said it was just a practical arrangement. You needed help with the ranch and I needed a home. Nothing more than that. I remember, Yates said carefully. Things have changed for me, Clara continued, her heart pounding. Over these past months, getting to know you, working beside you, building a life here together, I've developed feelings for you, Yates. Real feelings. I think I'm falling in love with you, and I needed you to know that. I understand if you don't feel the same way, but I couldn't keep pretending that this is just a business arrangement anymore. Yates set down the harness, his hands trembling slightly. Clara, I've been half in love with you since the day you agreed to marry me. Watching you work so hard, seeing you turn this house into a real home, standing beside me when those men came. You're everything I never dared to hope for, but I didn't want to pressure you. I thought you might still be getting used to everything, and I didn't want to make you uncomfortable. Joy flooded through Clara. So you do have feelings for me. Feelings. Clara, I'm crazy about you. I think about you constantly. I lie awake at night knowing you're just on the other side of that wall, and it takes every ounce of willpower I have not to go to you. But I wanted you to come to me freely, when you were ready, not because you felt obligated. Clara stood and walked around the table. Yates rose to meet her, and she reached up to touch his face, feeling the roughness of his evening stubble beneath her palm. I'm ready now. He pulled her into his arms, and she went willingly, pressing against the solid warmth of his body. When he kissed her, it was nothing like the chaste peck at their wedding. This kiss was deep and hungry, full of all the longing they had both been suppressing for months. I love you, Yates murmured against her lips. God help me, Clara, I love you so much. I love you too, Clara whispered back. Take me to bed, Yates. Be my husband in truth. He carried her to his room, their room now, and they came together with a passion that had been building since the day they met. Afterward, lying in his arms with her head on his chest, Clara felt completely at peace for the first time since leaving Philadelphia. No more separate rooms, Yates said, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. I want you here with me every night. That was always my hope, Clara admitted. I've been yours since the day we married, Yates. It just took my heart a while to catch up with the vows. They talked late into the night, sharing dreams and fears, making plans for the ranch and their future together. When they finally slept, it was tangled together, reluctant to let go even in unconsciousness. The next morning, Clara woke in Yates's arms and felt such overwhelming happiness that tears came to her eyes. He stirred and saw her crying, immediately concerned. "What's wrong? Did I hurt you?" "No," Clara said, laughing through her tears. "I'm just so happy. I came here with nothing, expecting nothing, and instead I found everything. I found you." Yates kissed her tenderly. "I'm the one who got the better deal. You showed up with nothing, but you're all I need, Clara. You always will be." The words echoed the thought Clara had been carrying in her own heart. She kissed him back, and they made love again in the golden morning light, sealing their commitment to each other in the most fundamental way. Their lives settled into a new rhythm, this one sweeter than before. They worked together during the day and came together at night, building their partnership in all ways. Clara continued to improve the ranch, while Yates worked tirelessly to expand the herd. In late August, the territorial marshal finally responded to Yates's letter about the Colorado Cattle Company. He visited the ranch, a serious man named Samuel Wright, and took detailed notes about the encounter with Cutler and his men. "You're not the first to report problems with the Colorado Cattle Company," Wright told them. "We're building a case, but these things take time. In the meantime, keep your eyes open and report any further incidents immediately." A few weeks later, Cutler returned, this time with 5 men instead of 3. But Yates was ready. He had arranged for Jack Murphy and 2 other neighboring ranchers to be present, and the show of solidarity made Cutler think twice about causing trouble. "Last chance, Patterson," Cutler said. "The company's offer still stands." "And my answer still stands," Yates replied calmly. "This ranch isn't for sale. It will never be for sale. You're wasting your time here." Cutler's eyes narrowed. "You're making a mistake. That's my right. Now leave, before I have Marshal Wright arrest you for trespassing and harassment." This time, when the men rode away, they did not come back. Word eventually filtered through the community that the territorial government had launched an investigation into the Colorado Cattle Company's business practices, and several of their agents, including Cutler, had been arrested for intimidation and fraud. With that threat removed, life at the ranch became truly peaceful. Fall arrived, bringing cooler weather and brilliant colors to the cottonwood trees along the creek that ran through the property. The cattle sales went better than expected, providing enough income to pay off some of the debts Yates had inherited from his father and even make some improvements to the ranch. In October, Clara realized she had missed her monthly courses. She waited another month to be sure before telling Yates, wanting to be certain before raising his hopes. When she finally told him one evening after dinner, his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He swept her into his arms, spinning her around despite her laughing protests, his face transformed by joy. "A baby," he kept saying. "We're going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Clara asked, though she could see the answer clearly in his face. "Happy, Clara, I'm thrilled." Terrified but thrilled. He placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "When? Early May, I think. We'll have a spring baby." That winter was the happiest of Clara's life. Despite the occasional hardships of cold weather and the constant work of keeping the ranch running, she had never felt more content. Yates was attentive and loving, constantly worried that she might be overworking herself. Clara found his concern endearing, even when it became overprotective. Dorothy and the other neighboring women rallied around her, sharing advice and hand-me-down baby clothes. Jack Murphy helped Yates build a cradle during the long winter evenings, working by lamplight in the barn while Clara knitted tiny garments and prepared for motherhood. Christmas came, and Clara and Yates hosted their first holiday dinner at the ranch. The Murphys came, along with several other families from the area. The house was full of laughter and warmth, and as Clara looked around at the friends they had made and the life they had built, she marveled at how far she had come from that desperate moment, standing alone in Fort Collins with nothing but a threadbare dress. Spring arrived slowly, the prairie greening and flowers beginning to bloom in Clara's garden. As her time drew near, Yates became increasingly nervous, hovering over her until Clara had to shoo him out of the house so she could get her work done. On a warm May morning, Clara's labor began. Yates rode for Dorothy Murphy while Clara calmly continued with her preparations, having learned from Dorothy and the other women what to expect. By the time Dorothy arrived with two other experienced mothers, Clara's contractions were coming regularly. Yates was banished to the barn, where Jack Murphy joined him to keep him company and prevent him from pacing a hole in the floor. The labor was long and difficult, but Clara was strong and determined. As the sun began to set, she gave birth to a healthy baby boy with a lusty cry and a surprising amount of dark hair. "He's perfect," Dorothy pronounced, wrapping the baby and placing him in Clara's arms. "Strong and healthy. You did beautifully, Clara." Clara looked down at her son's red, squalling face and felt love unlike anything she had ever experienced. When Yates was finally allowed in, his eyes were red-rimmed and his face pale with worry. "Clara, are you all right?" "I'm wonderful," Clara assured him, exhausted but elated. "Come meet your son." Yates approached the bed as though walking on sacred ground. When he looked down at the baby in Clara's arms, his expression transformed into something almost worshipful. "He's so small," Yates whispered, afraid to touch. "He's perfect," Clara said. "Would you like to hold him?" With infinite care, Yates took his son in his arms. The baby quieted immediately, apparently soothed by his father's deep voice and gentle touch. Tears ran down Yates's face, and he made no attempt to hide them. "Thank you," he said to Clara. "Thank you for this gift, for this life, for everything." They named him Thomas, after Yates's father, with the middle name William after Clara's father. Little Thomas Patterson was welcomed into the world with love and celebration, the first of what Clara hoped would be many children to fill their home with joy. The months after Thomas's birth were exhausting but wonderful. Clara had never known she could function on so little sleep, but somehow she managed, sustained by love and Yates's unwavering support. He was a devoted father, getting up in the night to help with the baby, changing diapers without complaint, walking the floor with Thomas when he was fussy so Clara could rest. "I never knew I could love anyone as much as I love you," Yates told Clara one night as they lay in bed with baby Thomas sleeping peacefully in his cradle nearby. "But then this little one came along, and somehow my heart just got bigger." "Mine too," Clara agreed, snuggling against her husband's side. "I came here expecting nothing, and look what I found. A home, a husband who loves me, a beautiful son, everything I never dared to dream about." Summer passed in a blur of feeding schedules and sleepless nights, but also moments of pure magic like Thomas's first smile and the sound of his laughter. The ranch continued to prosper under Yates and Clara's joint management. They hired a young man from town to help with the heavy labor, allowing Yates more time to spend with his family. By the time Thomas celebrated his first birthday in May of 1880, Clara was pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect, and in January of 1881, she delivered a daughter they named Sarah Eleanor, after both their mothers. With 2 young children and a thriving ranch, life was full but rich. Clara's days were spent caring for the children, maintaining the house, and helping Yates with the ranch work when she could. The vegetable garden she had started that first summer had expanded significantly, and she now traded preserves and vegetables with the other ranch families for goods she could not produce herself. Yates proved to be not just a good husband but an excellent father. He was patient and playful with the children, teaching Thomas to ride almost as soon as the boy could walk, and treating little Sarah with infinite gentleness. The years passed in this way, marked by the changing seasons and the growth of their children. Thomas became a sturdy, adventurous boy who loved helping his father with the cattle. Sarah was quieter, more thoughtful, with a love of growing things that reminded Yates of Clara. In 1883, their third child arrived, another boy they named James. The house rang with the sound of children's voices, and Clara often thought back to that first night at the ranch, when the house had been so quiet and empty. Now it was full of life and love, exactly as a home should be. The Colorado Cattle Company was long gone. Broken up after the territorial investigation revealed extensive fraud and corruption. Several smaller ranches in the area had banded together to form a cooperative, helping each other with labor during busy seasons and negotiating better prices for their cattle. Yates was one of the founding members, respected by his neighbors for his integrity and hard work. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Yates took Clara into Fort Collins for a rare night away from the children, who were being looked after by the Murphys. Over dinner at the hotel restaurant, Yates presented Clara with a beautiful shawl he had ordered specially from Denver. 5 years, he said, shaking his head in wonder. Sometimes it feels like just yesterday that you stepped off that stagecoach with nothing but hope and courage. Other times it feels like you've always been here, like I can't remember my life before you. I know exactly what you mean, Clara said, running her fingers over the soft wool of the shawl. Yates, do you ever think about how different things might have been if Howard Patterson hadn't died, if I had married him instead of you? Sometimes, Yates admitted. And it terrifies me. The thought of you being here in Colorado, but not with me, not mine. I thank God every day that things worked out the way they did, even though I know that's selfish. It's not selfish. I thank God, too. Howard Patterson might have been a perfectly nice man, but he wasn't you. And you're the one I was meant to find. Clara reached across the table to take Yates's hand. That day in the general store when you asked me to marry you, you said you weren't looking for a love match, just a practical arrangement. I was a fool, Yates said with a smile. I was so determined to protect my heart that I nearly missed out on the best thing that ever happened to me. But you didn't miss out. We found each other and we found love, even though neither of us was looking for it. Best decision I ever made, Yates said, asking you to marry me. Though I should admit, it wasn't entirely practical. You were the most beautiful woman I had ever seen, standing there in that store, all proud and desperate and trying so hard to be brave. I wanted to help you, yes, but I also wanted you for myself. I just didn't let myself admit it at the time. Clara felt warmth spread through her chest. Even after 5 years of marriage, Yates could still make her heart race with just a few words. That night, in the privacy of their hotel room, they made love with the leisure and lack of interruption that was impossible at home with 3 young children. Afterward, lying in Yates's arms, Clara reflected on how blessed she truly was. "What are you thinking about?" Yates asked, his fingers combing gently through her hair. "Just how happy I am, how grateful. I came west with nothing, absolutely nothing, and you said I was all you needed. But Yates, you've given me everything. A home, a family, love, purpose. You saved my life that day in Fort Collins, even if you didn't know it." "You saved mine too," Yates replied seriously. "I was just going through the motions before you came. Working myself to exhaustion every day so I wouldn't have to think about how lonely I was. You brought light and life to everything, Clara. You made my house a home, my ranch a success, and me a better man than I ever thought I could be." They held each other in the darkness, two people who had found each other by chance and built a life together through love and determination. The years continued to pass. The children grew, the ranch prospered, and Clara and Yates's love deepened with time. They had their challenges, certainly. There were droughts that threatened the cattle, illnesses that swept through the family, and the constant hard work that frontier life demanded. But they faced everything together, their partnership unshakable. In 1885, Clara delivered their fourth child, a girl they named Margaret. By then, Thomas was 7 and already a capable helper on the ranch. Sarah was 4 and had developed a talent for drawing, covering any available paper with sketches of horses and prairie flowers. James was 2, a whirlwind of energy who kept Clara constantly on her toes. Dorothy Murphy remained Clara's closest friend, and their families were often together. The children played while the adults worked and talked, building a community that sustained them all. One evening when Margaret was about 6 months old, Clara and Yates sat on the porch watching the sun set over the prairie while the children played in the yard under Sarah's watchful eye. The house behind them glowed with warm lamplight, and the sound of the children's laughter filled the air. "Do you ever miss Philadelphia?" Yates asked, a question he had never voiced before. Clara considered it seriously. "I miss my parents, of course. I'll always miss them. But the city itself? No, this is my home now. These are my people. I can't imagine living anywhere else. Even though life here is hard. Even though you work from dawn to dusk and rarely have the luxuries you might have had back east, especially because of those things," Clara said. "Everything we have here we built together. Every improvement to the ranch, every child, every moment of happiness. We earned it all through our own efforts. There's a satisfaction in that no amount of luxury could replace." Yates pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "I love you, Clara Patterson, more than I could ever put into words. I love you too, always." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, they called the children inside for supper. Thomas came running, followed by Sarah holding James's hand, and Yates carried Margaret on his shoulders. They trooped into the house together, a family united by love and strengthened by the challenges they had overcome together. The years rolled on in this way, each one bringing new joys and occasional sorrows, but always with the constant foundation of Clara and Yates's love sustaining the family. Thomas grew into a fine young man, eventually taking over more and more of the ranch operations. Sarah's artistic talent led her to become a teacher, educating the children of Fort Collins. James proved to have a gift with horses and started a successful breeding program. Margaret, the baby, grew into a spirited girl who reminded everyone of Clara with her determination and courage. As Clara and Yates aged together, they often reflected on the improbable beginning of their love story. The fact that Clara had come west to marry a different man, that Howard Patterson's untimely death had set her on a path to Yates, that she had arrived with nothing and yet had been exactly what Yates needed. All of it seemed like divine providence. On their 25th wedding anniversary in 1903, the entire family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. Thomas was there with his wife and 3 children. Sarah brought her husband and 2 daughters. James came with his new bride. Margaret, now 18 and newly engaged, helped Clara prepare the feast, looking around at the crowded, noisy house full of love and life. Clara thought back to that frightened young woman who had stepped off the stagecoach in Fort Collins so many years ago. That woman had been alone, penniless, and terrified of the future. She could never have imagined the life that was waiting for her, the love she would find, the family she would create. Yates found her in the kitchen, standing by the window looking out over the ranch that they had built together. His hair was more gray than dark now, and lines creased his face, but his eyes held the same warmth and love they had shown that day in the general store when he asked her to marry him. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, slipping his arms around her waist from behind. "Just remembering that first day when you said, 'I showed up with nothing and told me I was all you needed.'" "You were all I needed," Yates said firmly. "Still are. Everything good in my life came from you, Clara. Our children, our grandchildren, the success of the ranch, the happiness I feel every single day. All of it traces back to that moment when I had the good sense to ask you to marry me." "I'm the one who benefited from that bargain," Clara argued, turning in his arms to face him. "I was lost and alone, and you gave me a home and a purpose and a love I never dreamed possible." "We both benefited," Yates said, settling the argument as he always did with a kiss. Their children and grandchildren called them to the table, where a feast was laid out in their honor. As they sat surrounded by the family they had created, Clara and Yates held hands beneath the table, their fingers intertwined as their lives had been for 25 years. The party went late into the evening, with music and laughter and stories told and retold. When everyone had finally gone to bed or headed home, Clara and Yates sat alone on the porch once more, watching the stars wheel overhead. 25 years, Clara mused. It seems like both forever and no time at all. "Here's to 25 more," Yates said, raising the glass of wine Thomas had brought for the celebration. "At least," Clara agreed, touching her glass to his. They sat in comfortable silence, the silence of two people who knew each other so well that words were often unnecessary. The prairie stretched out before them, vast and beautiful in the moonlight, the same prairie that had witnessed their first meeting and every day of their lives together since. Clara thought about all the twists of fate that had brought her to this moment. If her parents had not died, if she had not been desperate enough to answer an advertisement for a mail-order bride, if Howard Patterson had not fallen ill, if Yates had not been in town that particular day, if he had not had the courage to propose to a stranger. Any one of those things going differently would have meant they never found each other, but they had found each other against all odds, and from that improbable beginning they had built something beautiful and lasting. A marriage, a family, a legacy that would continue long after they were gone. "No regrets?" Yates asked as though reading her thoughts. "Not a single one," Clara replied honestly. "Every choice I made led me here to you, to this life. How could I regret any of it? I feel the same way." Yates stood and offered her his hand. "Come to bed, my love. We have the rest of our lives to enjoy together." Clara took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. They walked into the house together, into the home they had made, ready to face whatever the future held as they had faced everything else together. The Patterson Ranch would remain in the family for generations, a testament to the love and hard work of Clara and Yates. Their children would tell their children the story of how their grandparents met, how Clara came west with nothing and found everything, how Yates had the wisdom to see that she was all he needed. As Clara drifted off to sleep that night in the arms of the man she loved, she felt profound gratitude for the journey that had brought her here. She had traveled west seeking security and found love instead. She had arrived with nothing material, but everything she needed in terms of courage and determination. And Yates had been right all those years ago, on their wedding day and in the years since. She was all he needed, and he was all she needed, and together they had built a life that was richer than either of them could have imagined. The mail-order bride who showed up with nothing had found absolutely everything in the arms of a lonely rancher who saw past her lack of possessions to the treasure of her heart. Their love story, born of necessity and desperation, had blossomed into something beautiful and eternal. And as the years passed and eventually Clara and Yates left this world behind, their legacy lived on in the family they created, in the ranch they built, and in the example they set of what true love could accomplish when two people committed themselves fully to each other and to building a life together. The end.